This is Hannibal, and I'm at the very same cabins where the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali, once had a training camp at this resort. But today, I am going to do a 2019 career interview because I float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Ain't nobody as pretty or as powerful as me. This is Hannibal from the HannibalTV.com. I am here in the middle of a forest in a cabin. I am going to do a shoot interview with myself, but I am going to have one of my The Hannibal TV representatives asking the questions for me. I jotted down on some paper some of the questions we get at Great North Wrestling the most for me to talk about. So those are going to be the questions. To start this off, you can ask me the first person I had jotted down there that people want to know about.
So you want to talk to us about Ted Hart and what's new with him?
Ted Hart, yes, there's a story on there that I've had a lot. We didn't discuss this in my shoot interview with Ted Hart. I'm actually going to be doing a live comedy show taping with Ted Hart the day before my August 10th match against him at the Petawawa Civic Center in Petawawa, Ontario. It's also going to be at the Petawawa Civic Center. It's going to be my second comedy show taping. I'm also doing one in May, but this won't be out here before then. I'm doing a comedy show with Brian Knobs in May. That'll already be out by the time this airs. But the question I had about Ted that we will probably discuss, the two of us in our comedy show, is the time that he made a citizen's arrest and got a commendation for it by the city of Calgary. And what basically happened that night was, at that time, we were hanging out all the time, probably at least 3 to 4 nights a week, doing various things together in Calgary. We were both, I think he's a few years older than me. I was in my early 20s, and we were driving around and we would kind of just cause trouble and get into mischief and have fun. But on this night, I was driving and he just said, "Devon, follow this guy, follow this guy." So I start following this guy who's running away from something, I don't know what, and he's like, "Pull over." So I just pull over on the side of the road, and we're downtown Calgary, and we chase this guy through alleys, on the sidewalk, literally pushing people out of our ways, going after this guy. And I have no idea why Ted is chasing this guy. We eventually take him down. The guy has a switchblade on him and over $2,000 in cash. And about 5 minutes after we apprehended this guy, the cops showed up, and Ted explained to me that he saw that the police were chasing this guy, and he just wanted to have some fun and chase this guy down. So we actually chased the guy down and were able to apprehend him, and that was a good thing by Ted. But that's the kind of thing that happens when you hang around Ted. There's always craziness and unusual situations, but we have been friends for a long time. But in Petawawa, Ontario, we have not wrestled since 2004 or 5. It was somewhere around that time on an Indian reserve outside Regina. And at that point in time, it was the best match I ever had. I think it was a double DQ or something. But we're going to have the match again in Petawawa. And we are going to put our friendship aside for that night. And I highly suggest anyone watching this go to ticketweb.ca and buy your tickets, or show up at the door and buy your tickets. It's going to be a hell of a fight, and we are going to leave it all in the ring.
The next one we have is we're going to be seeing Greg Valentine's in Nevada in a few days. So what's going to be new and coming up for him?
Greg Valentine, yes, we are doing a shoot interview with him But everyone wants to know what the heat was between Greg Valentine and I. It happened around 2011. I was associated with other YouTube channels in the past. It was out there in the past. We haven't really talked about it since 2011, but it was a big deal at the time because we had used Greg Valentine in Great North Wrestling at that point from 2007 to 2011 on a regular basis. He was one of the legends that helped put Great North Wrestling on the map in the early days of Great North Wrestling. And I considered him a friend of mine because we would drive to shows together. We made radio appearances together, and he was always nice to me. I even remember him actually singing in the car with me, if you can believe Greg Valentine doing that, but he actually liked country music, and he would sing from time to time, which might be hard to believe if you don't know him. So we were, after Macho Man passed away, I was close with Lanny Poffo at the time. I'm not close with Lanny Poffo anymore, but he was friends with me, and I asked for his blessing to put on the official Macho Man Memorial Show, which is actually on the Hannibal TV for anyone that wants to look that up. And the main event for that Macho Man Memorial Show was supposed to be Greg Valentine, who was a friend of Macho Man's, versus Lanny Poffo. Jay Lethal, who everyone knows is a huge Macho Man fan and a huge Macho Man impressionist, was also on that card. He, of course, has gone on to be Ring of Honor World Champion, headlining Madison Square Garden. And at the time, Macho Man was one of my idols growing up. And when I used to have backyard wrestling matches, starting at the time I was 5 or 6 years old, I often played Macho Man. So his death actually hit me very hard, thinking back to that time. So it meant a lot to me to put on that show. And basically, a couple days before the show, Greg Valentine, who I'd already sent a deposit to, called me up and said he had just looked at his flight. Now, he had this flight for quite a long time, and he said he did not want to take the flight, and he said he was not going to get on the flight unless I sent him the full amount of money in advance. Now, it's very unusual for that to happen. I did only do that with one other person in the past, which was Goldust, who also ended up no-showing the show. But now let me just say, Goldust, it's well documented. He had a pill issue for a number of years, and that was during his dark period where that happened. So for Greg Valentine, he told me if I sent him the money, he swore on a stack of Bibles he would show up to the show. And the plane ticket I had for him was a combined hotel and flight, and he ended up not getting on the flight, and he no-showed the official Macho Man Randy Savage memorial show. So that actually, anytime a wrestler no-shows, it hurts a company's credibility. Bret Hart actually no-showed the very first Great North Wrestling event, and we had a huge crowd for that, and that hurt our company. Took us several years to overcome that. But this also hurt our company because it was a high-profile show, and he no-showed. Not one person that night took a refund, not a single person, and there was about 1,000 people in the building. But it hurt us in the future. The next year, when we came back to that same town, even though we had Scott Steiner, who has always been a great draw for us, we did not draw as many people. So it definitely hurt our reputation. He never ended up paying me the deposit back and the rest of the whole money back, but he's part of my deal with the shoot interview I'm doing with him, which will already be out by the time this airs, unless it doesn't happen, which I don't think it will, is we're putting our past behind us and we're moving forward because we were friends, and he can still be a big part of my channel, and I'm going to run into him at conventions. He's an older guy. There's no point in me fighting him at this point. We're just going to let bygones be bygones. So that's it. I'm considering it case closed for Greg Valentine and I. If that shoot interview happens, which I believe it will.
Okay, that to be continues and to be seen. Jeff Jarrett, what's going to be happening with him next week?
Jeff Jarrett, nothing's going to be happening with Jeff Jarrett actually, but people have asked me about Jeff Jarrett. He actually refused to do interviews with us at WrestleCon. David Penzer, who was representing the Hannibal TV, asked him to do an interview, and he'd previously done interviews with both myself and David Penzer. He refused to do an interview because he was upset at the video I posted of his father, Jerry Jarrett, a man that I have nothing but the highest respect for, and I'll take a friendship with Jerry Jarrett any day over Jeff Jarrett. But he refused to do an interview with us, so that's that. I don't really hold a grudge or anything against Jeff Jarrett for that, but for the people wondering what my relationship with Jeff Jarrett is, he's a little mad at me over that. I'm happy he's back with WWE, and he's had a lot of issues over the past numerous years. It appears that he's successfully completed their rehab program, and he's now working, I believe, behind the scenes in the creative side of things. So that's what's up with Jarrett, and I don't hold anything against him. I actually like him. I've used him in Great North Wrestling before and never had a bad in-person interaction with him.
Anything new with Sonny?
There's nothing new with Sonny, but since I've been posting a lot of interviews about Sonny, people ask me how I know Sonny. Well, I actually only ever met her one time, and that was when we used Sonny and Brutus the Barber Beefcake and Great North Wrestling on a 2-day tour in 2008 in Montreal, or Ottawa first, then Montreal. I actually used to find her good looking when I was a kid, and I found her very attractive, and I was a fan of hers. And this was a case where sometimes you meet wrestlers and they actually totally live up to your expectations, like Superstar Billy Graham. That guy totally went above and beyond my expectations of meeting him. Honky Tonk Man and I, who I think I'm going to get into later, him and I was a fan of his, and we ended up becoming friends over the years. And there's others. I'm not going to name them all because there's too many, but those are two at the top of my list that I would consider great. Davey Boy Smith, who passed away, unfortunately, he was one of the first wrestlers I ever met when I was doing Mat Rats, and he was coming to watch Harry and Georgia Smith. And he exceeded my expectations with how nice he was when I met him. But Sonny, she was just whiny. She was heavier at that time, and I remember having to drive her from the third day of that tour was in Toronto for another company that we were just exchanging the talent with, splitting on the flight. And I remember having to drive both of them from Montreal to Toronto. Brutus had been up partying all night. He had only slept about an hour. We thought he was dead. He was not waking up when we were banging on his room, and it was an afternoon event in Toronto, so we had to leave pretty early in the morning, and Brutus was out at a all-night club the night before with me, but I just stayed awake. I just think I went and had something to eat in between, but I remember the drive from Montreal to Toronto, listening to Sonny whine the whole way was horrible. And I remember when we checked her into the hotel, this was before cell phone internet, there was someone on the internet computer, and she was insistent that I kick the guy off so she could use the computer. and I just felt like a total asshole doing that. But at that point, I was just sick of her whining, so I did that. So she was not a very fun person to meet, and I wish her the best with all of her issues. She has serious issues. The other thing I don't like about her is she spent so much of the money of WWE's rehab. I believe her and Scott Hall hold the record for most money spent on them. And I know it's actually not their fault that all this money was spent on them, but you have a guy like superstar Billy Graham who needs $25,000 for some serious medical issues, and you have Marty Jannetty who needs $40,000 for a serious ankle issue, and they won't help with that, but they'll spend literally hundreds of thousands of dollars on drug rehab that isn't in-ring related. So I guess I shouldn't hold animosity to her over that, because I do think the rehab program is good, but it's unfortunate that they don't help out some of their past legends. And Marty Jannetty and Billy Graham, for two people, they really made a mark in WWE and are two big WWE guys, and it's just unfortunate that they don't get help with their medical issues.
Do you want to speak to us about the conflict between Tony Atlas and Brian Blair that we're going to be seeing next week?
Oh, Brian Blair, yes, I'm going to be seeing him. He's the president of the Cauliflower Alley Club. I would consider him a friend and a stand-up guy. I'd put him on the list of one of the wrestlers that appears exactly how he is in real life. He's a great guy, and his work, which is, from what I understand, is volunteer for the Cauliflower Alley Club, is great. Tony Atlas, I also love Tony Atlas. He's very popular on the Hannibal TV, and they have a conflict over what really happened in the fight that Tony Atlas had with Mr. Wonderful, and Tony Atlas, I guess, is upset over what Brian Blair said. But my only opinion on it is we're gonna have to ask Paul Orndorff's version, but I still feel Paul Orndorff's version might be a bit jaded since he was in the fight, and Tommy Rich was the other person in the car. Tommy Rich, that'd be interesting to hear, but Brian Blair claimed in his interview that Paul Orndorff was not losing when he bit Tony Atlas's ear off. But that just doesn't make sense. If you're winning a fight, why would you bite someone's ear? Didn't bite the ear off, but bit a part of the bottom of the ear off. That's something that you would do in desperation, like when Mike Tyson bit Evander Holyfield's ear off. That was in desperation. He didn't want to lose the fight. He'd rather just get disqualified and give some punishment to Evander Holyfield in that case, which, by the way, they buried the hatchet, as have Paul Orndorff and Tony Atlas. They've also buried the hatchet, but I would say it's more likely that Paul Orndorff was in a prone position when that ear was bitten. But of course, Blair is really great friends with Mr. Wonderful, so obviously he's going to be more on Mr. Wonderful's side. But I wasn't there. I don't know what happened, and I think both guys are great guys, and I wish them both nothing but the best, and I hope they both continue to do interviews with me as time goes on.
Is it true that you promoted TNA's first Canadian tour in 2007?
Yes, I am actually the one that brought Impact Wrestling to Canada for the very first time, all the way back in December 2007. Many people have asked me if this is true, including David Penzer on his Sitting Ringside podcast recently. But this channel has different viewers than the podcast. We have some crossover, but mostly my fans are a little different. We hit a little bit more controversial topics on this channel. But yeah, the way that happened was I had done a big Great North Wrestling event that had almost 4,000 people at the Ottawa Civic Centre, a very historic wrestling venue. Ric Flair actually made his first WWE appearance in that venue, the conflict he had with Roddy Piper, with, I believe it was Mean Gene announcing at that time, and Vince McMahon ended up getting hit with a chair in the melee. That actually happened at the Ottawa Civic Center, and that was a place where I watched wrestling as a kid, so I always wanted to wrestle there. UFC even has put on an event there, and I really wanted to wrestle there, so I put on a massive show there. At the time, I used Abdullah the Butcher, Psycho Sid, AJ Styles, Jinder Mahal, Jeff Jarrett was on that card, Christian, who was in TNA, was on that card, Kamala, a guy who I absolutely adore, who's a first-class person, was on that card, Lanny Poffo was on that card, Jinder Mahal's partner, Raj, was also on that card. I believe he is in Impact Wrestling now. I haven't watched Impact Wrestling because I don't have cable, but I've seen on his Facebook posts. He is in Impact Wrestling, but I don't remember what his name is. So it was a star-studded event, and we had a huge crowd, and like Jeff Jarrett was involved in the backstage of TNA then, and because there were TNA wrestlers on the show, they were all impressed. So I was in contact with the TNA live event people at the time, and they wanted me to put on a 3-day Canadian tour. They didn't want me to put on just one event because they didn't feel one event would be enough for the travel. So with cutting this story down a lot, I put on the first 3 events, which were in Montreal at the Pierre Charbonneau Center, Quebec City at the Colisée Pepsi, and the Robert Gertin Arena in Gatineau, Quebec. And I also hooked TNA up with the arena in Oshawa, Ontario, just outside of Toronto. I had contacts in that arena, and they ended up having a paid show covered, I believe, by the town, and whoever was running the arena did a paid show for that event. So all their costs were covered for that event, and the arena took the gate money and kept it. So I was doing this mainly because I wanted to be in TNA at the time. They were thinking Terry Taylor was in charge of talent relations at the time. I had done some seminars with him. He had watched me wrestle. He liked me. He was thinking of possibly having me feud with Abyss at the time. And it was around the time Abyss was feuding with Ricky Banderas, who was known as Judas Messias in TNA, and I think he's Mil Mortes in Lucha Underground. So I had a similar character to that, so I would have fit into the mix. They were even thinking, from what I understand, of having James Mitchell manage me. But unfortunately, the arenas we went to were just too big for the names of TNA that they used. Because if you look at the show that I put on that had the 4,000 fans, yes, we had the top stars of TNA, but we also had the stars of yesteryear like Sid Vicious, Abdullah the Butcher, Kamala, Lanny Poffo. Then we had a local person like me on the card that had lots of local publicity, and there were some other local wrestlers on the card that helped get the local people out and sell tickets locally. So just having the TNA stars, it wasn't enough to fill the gigantic arenas that cost a lot to rent out. So unfortunately, even though the crowds we had at that time were all over 1,000, some were close to 2,000, and TNA's average house show attendance was only 800 at that time. So even though we had larger than average crowds for TNA, because of the cost of the arenas, the loss was just too much, and it kind of severed my relationship with TNA. But yes, I was the person that actually brought Impact to Canada for the first time, and there ended up being a pay-per-view in Toronto, or in Oshawa I should say, shortly after the house show in Oshawa. So I'm also responsible technically for the first TNA pay-per-view in Canada because I was the one that hooked them up with the arena. So an unfortunate experience overall. I really did a lot to try and help TNA, but it kind of backfired, whereas if I probably hadn't promoted those events, there never would have been any heat between us, and I probably would have ended up getting into TNA, but whatever, I learned a lot from that, and in retrospect, I don't think I'd ever agree to the deal that I had with them to begin with, because I lost a lot of my own money on those deals, and it took me a long time to pay off lines of credits that I took out from that. But those arenas were just too big to fill. They needed to go to smaller places that cost less.
The fans have been hoping for Honky Tonk Man to come back to the Hannibal TV. When is this happening?
Honky Tonk Man, he was actually supposed to do an interview with me in Phoenix this week, and prior to that, he was going to do one back in February, but he delayed it until this time, and then after it was announced, actually shortly before it was announced that he was going into the WWE Hall of Fame, he canceled the one that was supposed to be this week. So I believe ultimately he canceled due to some affiliation with the WWE Hall of Fame. I understand Brutus Beefcake, who was also inducted into the Hall of Fame this year and was another one of the original Great North Wrestling stars, also had to pull out of autograph sessions WrestleMania weekend due to his WWE Hall of Fame induction. So the reason it's not happening, the part 2 that everyone wants, part 1 has over 1 million hits. It might have to be delayed. We might have to wait some time after the WWE Hall of Fame induction and see how it goes in the coming years, but I would love to do a follow-up with Honky Tonk Man, and it was long overdue for him to go in the WWE Hall of Fame. He should have been there a long time ago.
What's new with Billy Graham? We just saw him this week.
Yeah, Billy Graham did a shoot interview with me yesterday. He has a lot of health issues. It's very sad. I spoke about him earlier about he doesn't have help from WWE paying for those medical issues. His own medical insurance covers some of his health issues, but not all of it. So he does have a GoFundMe going. If you search Billy Graham GoFundMe, by the time this airs, his GoFundMe video will pop up, and the link to his GoFundMe is in the description of that. And I think even if you search on Google Billy Graham GoFundMe, you'll find Billy Graham's GoFundMe.
If I could just stop you, if you go directly to GoFundMe, the GoFundMe pages, and you type Billy Graham, you will be able to find him.
There you go. Very good answer there. So he actually, I found out, I didn't know this because he hasn't talked about it, he has skin cancer now, and it's fairly serious. He has it on his face, has it on his back, he has it pretty badly on his legs. He also has a serious heart issue where he has trouble breathing. He can't walk up 3 flights of stairs without a high risk of a heart attack. That's what his doctors told him. Do not walk up flights of stairs. And I saw it myself. Walking just short distances bothers him because he's out of breath. It takes a lot out of his heart. He really needs hip surgery badly. He can barely walk. He can't even stand without a cane. He needs help getting up, or if he's by himself, he really needs to use that cane to get up. He also has some internal issues. I mean, he's got some, without going into the details, he's got some bleeding issues. So, and then he also has kidney issues. He has a problem where he has to urinate very, very frequently. So, to keep him alive longer, if you're a Billy Graham fan, I would highly suggest that you go to GoFundMe and search his name, because Superstar Billy Graham is a great guy. Some people get a little offended by some of his posts on his Facebook, but he's just trying to stay relevant, and he's always been a heel. So he likes to stir up controversy. That's it. That's all. It's nothing personal. He's actually a really nice guy, but he's also in a lot of pain, and he's not a rich person. He lives at a very low means, so it's frustrating to him too for all he's done in the wrestling business. He's in all this pain with no financial help, and it's just a really sad situation. So that's where some of his anger comes from. You can't take that personally. It's just all of his medical issues and the inability to pay to get it fixed, and the fact that he's under a WWE Legends contract and WWE never uses him also bothers him. For Billy Graham's GoFundMe, I've personally donated to it, as well as other members of my team, but I also help Billy out in other ways, and I have given him money in other ways as well. So I really do my best to try and help Billy. I think of him like a father, a grandfather figure. I truly love him. He helped me get cured of hepatitis C, and he really means a lot to me. For everyone that asks me, I get this question all the time, will he do autograph conventions? He can't commit to autograph conventions, and he doesn't even want to commit to autograph people coming to him with stacks of autographs to sign, which he gets that question all the time. He can't commit to anything because his health is literally day to day, and he's in a lot of pain on a day-to-day basis. He did this shoot interview with me. For one thing, he wants it out there that he needs help, and for another thing, we're very close personal friends. We both got cured of hepatitis C. We've been talking on a daily basis since I met him many years ago, and I'll always be in debt to him. He did that interview to help me out. As far as autograph conventions, he really wants to do them, but if you guys want him to do autograph conventions, help him out. Donate to his GoFundMe so he can get well enough to attend these autograph conventions and meet you guys, because I know he loves meeting the fans.
What are your thoughts on All Elite Wrestling?
All Elite Wrestling, I get this question all the time. Hannibal, why don't you go to All Elite Wrestling? Just to put this into perspective, I have no control over what company signs me. I get this all the time. Why aren't you in Impact Wrestling? Why aren't you in WWE? For the fans out there that message me that, I don't have control over who signs me or who doesn't sign me. I had a WWE tryout set up by Gerald Briscoe in 2016. After talking to them for 7 weeks, it was mysteriously canceled shortly before the tryout, after they'd already sent me my itinerary. So I don't have any control on who hires me. Would I like to wrestle while I'm still in my prime? Yes. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I've got other things going. I'm still going to wrestle here and there in Great North Wrestling, like I'm wrestling Ted Hart on August the 10th in Petawawa, Ontario. But what do I think of All Elite Wrestling? I think it's good that WWE is finally going to have some real competition. They're very well funded, and I don't know if I'm going to agree with their product or not, but the wrestling product has become so stale since WCW went out of business. I don't even want to watch it. I can't watch any of the products. I keep up with the news, but we need some real competition. Ring of Honor's coming up. They just had a sold out show at Madison Square Garden. The Hannibal TV was actually there for the pre-show press conference, which you can search on the Hannibal TV. I like the people of Ring of Honor. I'm not that familiar with the product, but I'm happy PCO's in it. The management sounds great, but the more companies out there, the more places for wrestlers to work, I think it's just the better it's going to be for the wrestling industry. And I'm really impressed with Cody Rhodes. I'll answer this too. This is a question I get a lot. I did a promo on Cody Rhodes last June, I think, And the reason I did that promo, I wasn't just randomly calling him out. I was talking to his agent at the time, and it looked like I was going to be wrestling Cody Rhodes that August, but he ended up having a conflict with I don't know if it's called Heroes, or Titans, some show that he's been on, but the match ended up falling through, and then of course all this AEW stuff happened. But the reason I did that promo on Cody Rhodes was because last August there was talk with me and the agent that he was possibly going to wrestle me. So that's why we did the promo on Cody Rhodes, because I actually wanted to wrestle him, because I consider myself a protege of Billy Graham, and he had the big feud with Dusty Rhodes, Cody's father, so I thought we could kind of reignite that. But unfortunately it didn't happen, but good for him for all of his success. And I as I said, I don't know what kind of product it's going to be, but I'm just happy that there's going to be another well-funded company out there.
That's it. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap then. That's all the fan questions. We're in a no Wi-Fi zone here, so there's I couldn't go through my email, and actually I get a lot of fan questions. Please send them to greatnorthwrestling@gmail.com. When you guys message me on Facebook, often it comes in filtered messages and I don't see it, or I forget about it. If you send it to greatnorthwrestling@gmail.com, I will either answer it on the Great North Wrestling podcast, which is on iTunes. All the links for that are on thehannibaltv.com, or I'll answer it at some point in the shoot interview. I am a really, really busy person. I operate Great North Wrestling along with a lot of help. I do shoot interviews. I'm also a reporter. I also work a regular job. I also try and work out. I try and train in kickboxing, and I wrestle too from time to time. So people send me questions a lot of the times, and I just don't have time to answer them all personally. But if you send them to greatnorthwrestling@gmail.com, we will save them in a special folder, and the next time I'm able to answer fan questions, I'll look in that folder.
Or maybe next time we get set up.
Next time we get set up like this and someone ditches us. I really hope that doesn't happen. Thanks for everyone that watched this, and make sure you subscribe to The Hannibal TV, the #1 pro wrestling YouTube channel in Canada.